Most people wouldn't survive a single day in the Middle Ages, not because of war or plague, though those were always waiting, but because the basic rhythm of life itself was a gauntlet. Every step, every breath, every mouthful of food carried a risk. Comfort didn't exist. Safety was never guaranteed. And from the moment you opened your eyes in the cold dawn, the fight to make it to nightfall had already begun. I'm going to take you through that fight, hour by hour, so you can feel exactly what it was like to live one ordinary medieval day. You'll see the dirt no one mentions in fairy tales, smell the streets historians politely skip over, and face the kind of constant, grinding discomfort that shaped the lives of everyone who came before us. If you're enjoying these trips into the parts of history that never make it into textbooks, I'd appreciate a like or subscribe, and I'm always curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment with your location and the time right now. It blows my mind that people all over the world fall asleep to these stories. All right, let's step back to the 14th century. This won't be romantic, it won't be clean, and it definitely won't be easy. But before we start, get comfortable. Seriously, pull that blanket tight, shift your pillow, because in a few seconds, you're going to wish you had every bit of modern comfort you can get. You've just woken up somewhere in medieval Europe. The wooden shutters over your window don't quite meet, and the first pale light squeezes through the gaps along with a draught of damp, icy air. There's no glass, just warped planks that let in every whisper of wind and every sound from the street outside. Your bed is a sack of straw on a wooden frame. Each movement makes the straw crackle and jab through the coarse linen sheet. A wool blanket, heavy and itchy, is the only thing keeping you from shivering. It smells faintly of last night's smoke, and your breath hangs in the cold air in front of you. The room is one space shared with family, and in the winter with animals. The air is thick with the mingled scents of smoke, unwashed wool, and the earthy musk of livestock. A goat shifts behind a thin partition. Someone coughs in the corner. Privacy doesn't exist here. Outside, a rooster crows. Somewhere, a bucket clangs against the lip of a well. Your clothes from yesterday lie in a heap, stiff with cold, the smell embedded deep in the fabric. You'll wear them again today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. The fire in the hearth is almost dead. If you don't feed it soon, you'll lose the last ember and spend precious time in the bitter cold striking flint. You still have to fetch water before the others drain the well, and that's before you even think about food. This is not a special day in the Middle Ages. This is an average morning. And already the fight to make it to sunset has begun. For most medieval families, a house was less a sanctuary and more a compromise with the elements. It was there to keep out the worst of the cold, but it could not keep out the damp, the smells, or the pests. The walls, wattle and daub, a crude weave of sticks plastered with clay, straw and dung, were porous. In summer, heat seeped through them. In winter, the chill found its way in no matter how many blankets you piled on. The thatched roof above seemed warm from a distance, but it was alive. Lice, fleas and the occasional rat nested between the layers, rustling faintly when the wind shook the rafters. Inside, life was packed tightly. In poorer homes, people and animals shared the same single space. Goats, pigs and chickens huddled indoors for warmth, their breath steaming in the morning cold. Their manure mixed with the earthy smell of the packed dirt floor, already darkened by years of spilled ale, soup and ash from the hearth. People were used to it, but the first breath of morning air inside such a place always carried the same pungent reminder. This was survival, not comfort. You shift on the straw mattress, and feel a dry stalk jab through the linen sheet. Across the room, your father is already moving, stirring the embers in the hearth until they flare orange. Smoke swirls up toward the dark beams, carrying the scent of last night's stew, a mix of barley, root vegetables, and whatever scraps of meat could be found. Above, bunches of herbs dangle from the rafters, not just for flavour, but to mask the smell of sweat, smoke, and livestock. The hearth is the centre of everything. It's where food is cooked, where warmth is kept, and where family gathers after dark. But it's dangerous. Sparks fly, and accidents happen quickly. In the next village, a young boy's tunic caught fire when he leaned too close. The story still circulates, told in hushed voices to keep children wary. Furniture is sparse. A rough-hewn table scarred by knives and burns. A couple of benches. Perhaps one chair for the head of the household. A wooden chest against the wall guards the family's most valuable possessions. Tools, spare linens, a belt knife, maybe a few coins earned from market days. Everything else is either worn on your back or stored in sacks near the wall. Security is more about trust or fear than locks. The door is a single plank of wood, hung on leather hinges, barred from the inside with a simple latch. It's enough to keep out the wind, but not a determined intruder. In towns, drunken men sometimes stagger into the wrong home, collapsing into someone else's bed without a word. More dangerous are those who come sober, thieves looking for food or tools, debt collectors ready to strip the place bare, soldiers who take what they want. In some households, charms hang above the doorway, knotted cords, bits of carved wood, or small animal bones. People say they ward off sickness, thieves, and the restless dead. Whether they work or not, no one dares remove them. You've heard the story of the miller's wife who mocked such charms and took them down. 2 weeks later, her husband died suddenly in his sleep. The cause? Some say it was illness. Others say the spirits found their way in. Your home is both shield and snare. It's the only barrier between you and the cold, but it traps smoke, filth, and disease inside. It hides you from the street, but it can also corner you if danger comes to the door. As the first light seeps through the warped shutters, it's clear the day's challenges won't wait, and stepping outside will only bring a new set of them. In the medieval world, the day didn't begin with leisure. From the moment the first grey light crept over the horizon, work pressed in. The fire in the hearth had burned low overnight, leaving only a faint orange glow beneath the ashes. If those embers died, starting a new fire would mean fumbling with flint and steel in the bitter cold, sometimes for half an hour or more. That's why tending the fire was one of the first duties every morning. In many homes, this job fell to the youngest or most junior in the household, someone quick enough to act before the heat was lost. If no ember remained, there was one other option: borrowing fire from a neighbour. This meant stepping into the chill, carrying a small clay pot filled with glowing coals wrapped in ash. Dropping it would waste both time and goodwill. People did not lend fire lightly. It was an unspoken debt. Failing to return the favour someday could sour relations for months. Then came the water. Wells were often shared by several households, and the best time to draw water was before the sun rose fully, before the queue formed, before the livestock came to drink, and before careless hands muddied the water. The journey could be as short as a few steps from your doorway in a small village, or as long as half a mile if you lived on the outskirts. You lift the wooden bucket, feeling the cold bite into your fingers through the rope handle. Outside, the ground is still frozen in places, and your breath forms small clouds as you walk. The street is narrow, lined with the fronts of homes leaning slightly over the path. their upper stories jutting forward. Between them, a channel cut into the ground carries the runoff from the night before, a mix of rainwater, animal waste, and whatever else households dumped after dark. Reaching the well is never without its own hazards. In a place where gossip is currency, the well is one of the busiest social points. It's where news spreads, where arguments start, where grudges are aired. You've seen petty insults escalate into shoving matches here, and in darker times, you've heard of people being shoved into the well itself. They say it's always an accident, but those who vanish tend to have enemies. Not all water is safe. In bad years, the well could be poisoned, intentionally or otherwise. A rotting animal carcass dumped upstream, a careless disposal of waste too close to the source. Both could turn the water deadly in days. Villagers speak in whispers about families who all fell sick within the same week, their skin turning grey and their lips cracked and bleeding before the end. Some call it a curse, others quietly suspect sabotage. Back at home, the water will be used sparingly. Some will go into the cooking pot, some for drinking, and a small amount for washing, if there's enough to spare. Most washing is done with cold water. Heated water is a luxury, reserved for the sick, or for cleaning something too foul to touch otherwise. You set the bucket down by the hearth. The fire is now blazing, filling the room with flickering light. The day's work has truly begun. Soon there will be bread to prepare, tools to repair, animals to feed. And beyond the doorway, the rest of the village will stir, each person carrying their own quiet worries into the daylight. Because here, in the medieval morning, the challenges have only just begun, and already every step is a gamble. The doorway is the threshold between one kind of danger and another. Inside you have smoke, fleas, and the suffocating closeness of family and livestock. Outside the air is cleaner, but only for a moment. The narrow lane in front of your home is paved, if at all, with uneven cobblestones, slick from the night's frost. Between the stones, black mud clings, fed by a steady trickle from the open drain that runs down the middle of the street. In summer, it stinks so strongly that even locals pinch their noses. In winter, it freezes into jagged ice that can cut if you slip. The drain carries everything. Rainwater, scraps from kitchens, human waste tossed from chamber pots, blood from the butcher's block, and the runoff from tanners' yards where hides are soaked in urine and lye. Historians write politely about poor sanitation, but the reality was a chemical sting in your nostrils and the ever-present buzzing of flies. Yes, even in winter, when the warmth of the drains kept them alive. You keep to the edges of the street to avoid stepping in the worst of it, but that's dangerous too. Upper floors of houses overhang the street, and at any moment someone could empty a chamber pot out the window. The etiquette is to shout, "Gardez-l'eau," mind the water, before dumping, but not everyone bothers. The wrong step at the wrong time could mean a soaking that would mark you for the rest of the day, and in some cases, spread lice or worse. There are hazards that rarely make it into the books. Take the night soil thieves of certain towns, men who would slip into alleys before dawn to scrape up human waste, selling it to tanners or farmers as fertiliser. It was filthy work, but it paid. The danger wasn't in the waste. It was in being caught by the wrong person. If you scraped from the wrong cesspit, you could lose more than your job. In one recorded case in York, a man was found drowned headfirst in the very vat he'd been stealing from. Officially, an accident. Unofficially, everyone knew who had been angry enough to make it happen. The morning streets are also where gossip moves faster than the wind. Housewives exchange muttered judgments over bread prices. Apprentices slip away from their masters to flirt in corners, and children dart between carts, scavenging dropped food. In the corner of the square, a group of men huddle around a post reading, or pretending to read, the latest proclamations nailed there. Sometimes its tax increases. Sometimes it's the name of someone declared an outlaw, free to be hunted. You pass a man whose boots are caked in dried blood. He isn't a butcher. His trade is quieter but more feared. In towns, executioners had to live on the fringes, but their work brought them into the heart of things. You don't look him in the eye. Few people do, but you notice no one blocks his path. There's an unspoken rule. Let such men pass, because you never know when you might be the one they're sent for. Not all danger is human. Packs of half-wild dogs roam the alleys, feeding on scraps and fighting over bones. They are not pets, they are survivors, and they bite without warning. Children have been dragged into side streets and mauled badly enough to leave scars for life. Yet for all this, the street is alive in a way the inside of your home can never be. Merchants begin to set out their wares. The smell of baking bread cuts through the stink for brief, merciful moments, and somewhere a fiddler tunes his instrument, hoping for coins. But the beauty here is always edged with risk, and every step forward is a calculation. Because in the medieval street, you're not just walking, you're navigating a minefield of smells, sights and secrets that no one puts in the illuminated manuscripts. By the time you reach the marketplace, the sun has cleared the rooftops, spilling pale light over the stalls. From a distance, it looks almost cheerful. Bright fabric draped over tables, baskets of bread, barrels of fish, and the chatter of voices mixing with the clink of coins. But a closer look strips away the romance fast. The ground underfoot is already churned to mud from countless boots, hooves and cartwheels. Bits of straw have been thrown down to soak it up, but they only mask the muck for a few minutes before turning into a soggy mat. Here, a dropped apple lies half crushed, its skin split and crawling with flies. There, a fish head stares blankly from the gutter, its glassy eye clouding in the cold air. Merchants shout prices and praise their own goods, their voices rising to drown each other out. But in the spaces between their calls, quieter exchanges happen. Quick sales of stolen tools, pilfered bread, or trinkets that may have been taken from the pockets of the dead. In some towns the market is the safest place to offload such goods. The bustle hides both buyer and seller. And if you're wondering where the local pickpockets work, it's here, weaving between the crowd, fingers light as feathers. Many of them are children, thin, sharp-eyed, and fast enough to vanish if chased. You pause near a stall selling fresh meat. The butcher's block is slick with blood, and a dark rivulet snakes down to join the mud. Behind him, sides of pork and beef hang from hooks, swaying gently in the breeze. Flies buzz lazily over the carcasses, and in the summer, the smell would be almost unbearable. Today the cold keeps it dull, but the reality is still there. Meat spoils fast, and many buyers won't notice, or won't care, if it's already turning. Sometimes, a heavy salting hides the truth. Sometimes, a little vinegar masks the smell just long enough to sell it. At the far end of the market, the fishmongers work fast. Fish must be sold quickly, and the less fresh ones get tucked under better-looking catches, ready for less discerning customers. There's an unspoken code. If you know fish, you know where to look. If you don't, you pay the price. In the worst cases, spoiled fish is fed to the poor or desperate, who can't risk turning down any meal. Food poisoning kills quietly here. No one keeps track of numbers. In the shadows behind the main stalls, other goods change hands. Powders, dried leaves, small vials of liquid. Some are medicines, some are poisons, and some are both, depending on the dose. A widow with coin to spare might buy a remedy for her cough, or something to slip into her husband's drink. Officially, such trades are banned, but as long as the watchmen are paid, no one interferes. You move through the crowd, clutching your purse close. A man brushes past, muttering an apology, and only after a few steps do you realise your purse feels lighter. Spinning around, you catch sight of his back disappearing into the press of bodies. You could shout, but it's pointless. By the time help arrives, the purse will have changed hands twice. In the centre of the square, a small commotion draws attention. A thief has been caught. 2 men drag him toward a post, shouting over his protests. The market stalls nearby pause, their keepers leaning in to watch. Punishments here are public and fast, sometimes a fine, sometimes a beating, sometimes worse. The crowd closes in, eager for the spectacle. This is the market's other truth. It's as much a stage as a place of trade, and every performance has its price. The noise reaches you before you see it, a deep, restless murmur rolling through the crowd, punctuated by the occasional sharp laugh or jeer. In the middle of the marketplace, the open space that only an hour ago was filled with sellers and buyers has cleared into a rough circle. Everyone's attention is fixed on one spot, the wooden post driven deep into the mud, scarred from years of use. The thief, a wiry man with torn sleeves and mud caked to his knees, is already bound to it. His wrists are tied with coarse rope, his head forced downwards so the crowd can see his face. People here want a good look at the man, who, according to the shouts, lifted a purse from a merchant's stall. Whether he actually did it or not doesn't seem to matter anymore. Public punishment in the medieval world served 2 purposes: to humiliate the offender and to warn everyone else. The law wasn't designed for rehabilitation. It was designed for fear. Stocks, pillories, and whipping posts weren't tucked away in alleys. They were placed in the busiest parts of town, so every set of eyes could take in the lesson. And people came willingly, not out of civic duty, but for entertainment. You push closer through the throng. The smell hits first: damp wool, unwashed bodies, the metallic tang of blood from the butcher's stall, still drifting across the square. Children crane their necks, climbing onto barrels for a better view. A toothless woman next to you mutters a curse under her breath, not at the thief but at the watchman, accusing them of letting worse men walk free. A man in a leather jerkin steps forward, the beadle responsible for enforcing the day's sentence. His whip is little more than a length of knotted cord, but in the cold air each strike will feel like fire. He doesn't speak to the crowd. He doesn't have to. Everyone knows what's coming. The first lash lands with a crack, and the man at the post jerks forward, his breath escaping in a sharp grunt. In some towns, such punishments could escalate. Cutting off an ear for repeat offenders, branding a hand with a hot iron so no one would ever mistake them for honest again. Records mention thieves forced to walk barefoot through the streets, holding the goods they'd stolen, while the crowd threw refuse at them. In extreme cases, if the theft was from the church, the sentence could be far worse, though those punishments were often carried out behind monastery walls, where only a select few witnessed the justice. You catch the eye of a boy in the front row. He's grinning, not cruelly, but the way someone grins when they're caught up in the spectacle. To him, this is as normal as the fishmonger's call or the sound of a cartwheel over cobblestones. For the youngest, these punishments aren't warnings, they're part of growing up, part of how the world is explained. The whip cracks again, and this time the man lets out a choked sound. No one moves to help him. No one argues with the beadle. Here the crowd is not separate from the punishment, they are part of it. Their presence, their attention, their judgment is what makes it complete. By the time the ropes are cut and the thief stumbles away, the market has already begun to reform. Stalls reopen, cellars call out again, and the blood in the mud will soon be trampled into nothing. Life in the medieval town doesn't pause for justice. It folds it neatly into the day's business, then moves on. From the market square, the smell of ale leads you down a side street, narrower and darker than the main lanes. Here, the houses lean so far over the road that the sky becomes a thin strip of pale grey between their rooftops. Halfway along, a crooked wooden sign swings over a doorway, painted with a crude picture of a tankard. No words, most patrons couldn't read them anyway. Taverns in the medieval world were not the romantic candlelit halls of popular fiction. They were noisy, smoky, and often filthy, the floors sticky with spilled drink and whatever else the patrons left behind. Inside, the air is thick, part ale fumes, part sweat, part the sour tang of unwashed wool. A single narrow window lets in a shaft of daylight, but most of the illumination comes from the hearth, where a pot of something dark and thick bubbles slowly. At this hour, the tavern is already busy. Farmers who came to market linger here before heading back to their villages. Craftsmen take an early break, warming themselves before returning to work. In the corner, a dice game is in full swing, coins clinking against the table. The players lean in close, their voices low. Gambling for money is frowned upon in many towns, but that doesn't stop anyone. You pass a table where two men nurse tankards of ale. One wears the leather apron of a tanner. The smell of his trade clings to him like a second skin, pungent and eye-watering. The other's hands are stained red to the wrist, not from wine, but from his work at the slaughterhouse. These are not details the official chroniclers note, but everyone in the room knows exactly who does what. Taverns were also places of information, sometimes more valuable than the ale itself. Deals were made here not just for goods, but for services. A shipment smuggled past the customs men, a rival's warehouse set alight in the night, a debt collected without the official stamp of the law. Certain corners of the room were understood to be for certain kinds of talk. Sit there, and you were either part of it or soon would be. You take a seat on a rough bench, the wood worn smooth by years of use. The tavern keeper, a broad woman with arms like a blacksmith, slams down a tankard in front of you. The ale is cloudy, warm, and carries the faint taste of the barrel it came from, likely reused more than once without proper cleaning. But it's safer than water. Water carries disease you can't see. Ale has been boiled during brewing, and even the weakest brew keeps people alive longer than the well can. In a back corner, a man sits alone, hood drawn low. He's nursing not a drink, but a small bowl of broth, dipping bread into it slowly. No one sits near him. You hear whispers. He's from another town, here on business that no one wants to name. In a place like this, it's common knowledge that travellers might be merchants, messengers, or killers for hire. Asking too many questions is a quick way to start trouble. Then there's the darker side of daytime taverns, those who have nowhere else to go. Beggars sometimes slip inside to warm themselves until they're thrown out. Women who can't pay for a room sometimes strike deals with patrons in the shadows of the back wall, the tavern keeper looking the other way as long as they buy a drink first. These are the stories scrubbed from the clean versions of history, but in reality they were as much a part of tavern life as the ale itself. Outside, the street noise fades into the distance, and inside the tavern hums with a different rhythm. Half commerce, half confession. You can feel it in the air. This is where reputations are made. and where lives quietly end without a single official record. Leaving the tavern's warmth, you step back into the chill air and into streets that feel different from the market's bustle. Here, the lanes narrow even further, twisting between leaning buildings whose upper stories nearly touch. Sunlight barely reaches the ground, and the air is damp, heavy with the smell of standing water and refuse. These are the back streets, the veins of the medieval town that few outsiders ever see in daylight, and fewer still after dark. The paving, if it exists, is broken and uneven. In many places it's just dirt churned into mud, laced with the runoff from nearby workshops. The tanner's quarter leaks its stink into the air, ammonia and rotting flesh from hides soaking in vats. Not far away, the blacksmith's hammer rings out, but here the sound is muffled, absorbed by the narrow alleys and the constant drip of water from roofs. Here trade doesn't happen openly. Men and women linger in shadowed doorways, their eyes scanning every passerby. A boy of maybe 12 offers you a bundle of herbs, but these aren't for cooking. He names them in a whisper, and you recognise some as known abortifacients, others as poisons that could stop a grown man's heart. Such things aren't sold in the open market. Here they change hands without questions. There are other goods too. Blades short enough to hide in a sleeve. Coins shaved thin to pass as full weight. Purses emptied of their owner's knowledge. Some sellers are craftsmen who fell on hard times. Others are career thieves who know which constable's palm to grease to keep their corner safe. The city watch rarely comes here, unless in force, and even then, they leave quickly. These alleys have a way of swallowing strangers. A woman leans out of an upstairs window, calling softly to a man below. Her dress is loose at the shoulder, and the exchange is not about love, it's negotiation. Brothels aren't always marked by signs. Sometimes they're just houses where certain women take in laundry that never seems to be washed. Here it's an accepted part of the economy, though never mentioned in official records. In the deeper bends of the alley, you see the traces of last night's violence, a dark stain in the mud, a broken knife blade glinting in the gutter. No one hurries to clean it. Fights here are common, over debts, insults, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The bodies, if there were any, have already been carried away, perhaps to the potter's field, if no one claimed them. You pass a doorway where a group of children huddle, their faces pale, their clothes little more than rags. They watch you with the guarded look of those who have learned the world can be dangerous, even in daylight. Some of these children survive by running messages, others by lifting whatever they can from unwatched pockets. A few work for men you wouldn't dare meet. At the far end of the alley, a narrow archway leads into a small courtyard. Here, a single barrel of rainwater sits, its surface broken by floating debris. This is drinking water for some of the poorest in the city. A gamble with every sip. Illness spreads fast in places like this, and yet, for those with no coin, it's this or nothing. The back streets are the city's hidden heartbeat, thudding quietly, unseen, but keeping everything else alive. They're where fortunes are made in silence, where the law's shadow grows thin, and where survival belongs to those willing to do what others won't even speak of. The sound reaches you first, hammer on metal, saw on wood, the steady rasp of a file shaping bone into a comb. The workshops of the medieval town are strung along certain streets, each quarter devoted to a craft. By day, these are places of industry and skill, but also of hazards that no guild pamphlet would ever mention. The blacksmith's forge glows like a captured sun. Inside, the heat is suffocating. Even in winter, the air is thick with coal smoke and the sharp tang of hot iron. Apprentices pump the bellows until their arms ache, their tunics clinging with sweat. Sparks leap and dance, and burns are a daily occurrence, some small, some bad enough to cripple a hand. There's no talk of safety. You learn to dodge the embers, or you don't last. You pass the tanner's yard, a place so foul that even the locals avoid it unless they must. Hides soak in deep pits filled with a mix of water, lime and urine. The urine collected in buckets, left in the street for passers-by to fill. Children too young for heavy labour are sometimes sent to stir the hides with bare feet, their skin reddening and peeling from the chemicals. Tanners often live apart from the rest of the town, not just because of the smell, but because some believe their work curses them. Further along, the air shifts to a sweeter smell. The carpenter's quarter. Shavings curl like ribbons on the floor, and the scent of fresh-cut wood fills the air. But even here, danger lurks. A misplaced cut can take a finger. A falling beam can kill. In one town's records, a carpenter's apprentice was crushed when a cart of timber slipped its ropes. The entry was brief. Died in his craft. No further note. Glassmakers work in stifling heat, shaping molten glass into vessels, windows, or beads. Their lungs suffer from the constant smoke, and their eyes grow weak from the glare of the furnace. Some add lead to the glass for clarity, unaware, or perhaps uncaring, that it seeps into their skin over years, dulling the mind and blackening the gums. Then there are the quieter trades, hidden in smaller workshops. Bone carvers shaping knife handles from the remains of slaughtered animals. Cloth dyers who stand waist-deep in vats of colour, their hands permanently stained blue or red. Apothecaries grinding powders whose fumes can heal or kill. You step into one such apothecary shop. Shelves are crowded with jars, dried roots, preserved snakes, vials of pale liquid that catch the light like opals. A cat winds around your legs, its eyes reflecting the dim glow of the candles. The shop smells of rosemary, vinegar, and something sharper. Arsenic, perhaps. Officially, it's used to kill vermin. Unofficially, it has other uses, sold to clients who ask for it in whispers. Many workshops double as meeting places for guild members, where prices are fixed and rivals discussed. But behind closed doors, they can also be places where secrets are passed, a merchant shipment route, the arrival date of a goldsmith's latest order, or the name of someone who won't survive the winter. In the workshops, skill keeps you fed, but danger, of injury, of poisoning, of being caught in someone else's scheme, lurks in every corner. And when the day's labour ends, it's not always the body that feels the strain, but the conscience. The streets widen as you near the edge of town, the cramped alleys giving way to open ground before the looming walls. Here stand the city gates, massive wooden doors reinforced with iron, tall enough to let in a cart piled high with goods. Above them, a walkway runs the length of the wall, where guards pace slowly, their eyes scanning the road beyond. The gates are not just an entrance, they are a filter. Every traveller, every cart, every animal that passes through is observed, sometimes questioned, sometimes searched. Officially, it's about collecting tolls and keeping out criminals. Unofficially, it's also about making sure the right people are paid and the wrong ones kept outside. Guards here can be bribed, some more easily than others, and the price varies with the risk of what you're bringing in. You join a small crowd waiting for the gate to open fully. Ahead, a merchant's cart groans under the weight of barrels. The guard taps each one with a spear, listening for the hollow sound that might betray something hidden. Sometimes it's smuggled wine or cloth to avoid taxes. Sometimes it's worse, blades for rebellion, or human cargo no one dares speak of. Outside the gates, the world changes. The open road stretches toward fields and smaller villages, but it's not empty. Travellers come and go. Pilgrims with badges pinned to their cloaks, mercenaries with patched armour, peddlers whose packs are filled with whatever sells in the next town. Mixed among them are those with no honest trade, conmen, spies and deserters hoping to vanish into the anonymity of the city. The guards know the regulars by sight, and they know the troublemakers too. There are stories of people being turned away without explanation, faces that matched wanted descriptions, or simply those who carried the wrong kind of news. In some cases, the wrong news was nothing more than the truth, spoken too openly. You glance toward a group standing off to one side. Two men in hooded cloaks keep their faces down, their boots caked in dust from the long road. Between them is a small bound figure. Whether it's a child or a small adult, you can't tell. No one asks questions. In this place, questions can get you remembered by the wrong people. The area just inside the gates is a market of its own. Farmers sell fresh produce to those who don't want to venture into the centre. It's also where day labourers wait to be hired for unloading carts, carrying goods or other work. But hiring is risky. There are tales of men lured outside the gates for work and never seen again. Their bodies later found in the woods, stripped of anything valuable. Beyond the gates, hanging from wooden posts, are the grim reminders of the city's authority. Heads of executed criminals, sometimes salted to slow decay, stare blindly over the road. They are a message to newcomers. Whatever you've done elsewhere, don't bring it here. The locals barely glance at them anymore, but travellers often quicken their step as they pass beneath. For all its openness, the gate is a controlled point, a choke where power is enforced quietly and constantly. It's where the city decides who gets in, who stays out, and who vanishes without record. At the heart of the city lies the gathering square, a broad open space framed by the tallest and most ornate buildings the town can boast. Guild halls, the church, the mayor's house. This is where official life unfolds, where the town makes its pronouncements, and where the line between ceremony and control blurs until it's invisible. By mid-morning, the square is already alive. Merchants and townsfolk cluster in loose knots, their breath fogging in the cold air as they talk. At the far end, a raised wooden platform waits. It's used for speeches, proclamations, and punishments. Its double purpose is no accident. Anything that draws a crowd is a chance for the authorities to remind the people who holds the power here. A beadle strides up the steps, unrolling a length of parchment. His voice, thin but carrying, cuts through the hum of conversation as he reads the latest royal decrees. Taxes are to be increased for the defence of the realm. Certain goods, salt, iron, wine, are now subject to new tolls at the gate. There are also bans on specific gatherings after dark, framed as a measure against disorder, but widely understood as a way to break up political talk before it turns into action. You notice how the crowd reacts, or doesn't. Most stand silently, their expressions unreadable. But in small corners, mutters ripple through, quickly smothered. Everyone knows the square is not just for announcements, it's for listening. Men with sharp eyes and no guild badges drift among the people, pausing near anyone who speaks too freely. On days like this, other business is woven into the official proceedings. A merchant accused of cheating waits is brought forward, forced to stand on the platform and publicly confess before paying a fine. An apprentice who struck his master is paraded in chains, then released only after his family agrees to work off his debt. Sometimes the sentences are harsher, flogging, branding, or the stock set up at the edge of the square for all to see. but the square has its unspoken rules. Beneath the official show, deals are struck in the crowd. A bribe promised to a minor official for favourable terms on a shipment, a quiet agreement to look the other way when a cart leaves the city loaded heavier than declared. The market may be where goods change hands. The square is where power does. You glance toward the steps of the Guildhall, where the town's wealthiest men stand in their heavy cloaks, talking in low tones. Their eyes flick over the crowd like hawks scanning a field. They don't need to shout. Their influence works in quieter ways through patronage, favours, and the subtle threat of being shut out of the city's business altogether. At the edge of the square, a beggar kneels in the mud, holding out a hand to the passing crowd. Few stop. Fewer still drop coins. The beggar's saws and cough are enough to keep most at a distance, and in truth, some wonder whether such people are even allowed here. In some towns, beggars without a licence are driven from public spaces entirely, sometimes with a beating, sometimes with worse. By the time the proclamations end, the crowd begins to thin, breaking into streams that flow back into the side streets. The platform stands empty again, but its shadow lingers. Even without a man on it, it's a reminder. This is where you're seen, and being seen can be as dangerous as being judged. The church doors stand tall and heavy, their oak planks bound in dark iron. Stepping inside is like crossing into another world, one where the air is cool and still, and the dim light filters through narrow stained glass, staining the flagstones in muted reds and blues. The smell is a mix of beeswax from the candles, damp stone, and the faint musk of too many bodies gathered together in close quarters. Sunday service is the most public face of the medieval church, but it's also a stage where far more than devotion plays out. The congregation fills the nave, peasants in coarse wool tunics, merchants in better dyed cloth, and at the front, the notables, guild masters, landholders, and the mayor's family, seated where everyone can see them. Their position isn't just about piety, it's about reminding the town who holds both spiritual and earthly influence. The priest begins the Mass in Latin, a language only a handful of people here understand. The rest follow the rhythm of his voice and the gestures of the service, kneeling, bowing, and murmuring the responses they've learned by rote. The church insists the mystery is holy. Some suspect it's also a way to keep the priest as the sole interpreter of God's will. You watch as coins clink into the offertory box, a mix of genuine devotion and social necessity. Giving nothing marks you as stingy. Giving too much might raise suspicion about where you got it. For the poor, a single copper is a sacrifice. For the wealthy, a generous donation is an investment, often repaid in influence. More than one trade contract or land deal has been sealed in the shadow of the altar. Not all business here is holy. In the side aisles, whispers pass between clasped hands, heads bent close. Some are confessions, yes, but others are proposals, warnings, or veiled threats. A merchant might ask the priest to speak well of him to a rival guild. A landholder might hint at a gift if the church delays its tithe collection on a bad harvest. These conversations leave no written record, but they shape as much of the town's fate as the proclamations in the square. The church also polices morality, at least in theory. Adultery, theft, and heresy are all under its jurisdiction, but how strictly they're pursued often depends on who's involved. A poor man caught in a sin might face public penance or a beating. A wealthy donor might find his punishment quietly reduced to a few extra prayers. The townsfolk notice these patterns, but few dare speak of them openly. Your eyes drift upward to the rood screen, separating the nave from the chancel. Behind it, the choir chants in a haunting harmony, the Latin words weaving through the incense haze. For a moment, it feels like another time entirely, until you catch sight of the church warden slipping a note to a man in a hooded cloak, who pockets it without breaking stride. When the service ends, the congregation spills back into the daylight, their breath steaming in the cold. Outside, the churchyard is as much a meeting place as a burial ground. Children chase each other between the gravestones, vendors sell hot bread to the departing crowd, and men linger in small groups, discussing the sermon or pretending to. Deals begun in whispers. Inside the church will be finished here, beyond the echo of the priest's voice. The bells toll again, and their sound follows you into the street. A reminder that in the medieval town, the church's reach is long, and its shadow falls over far more than just the faithful. The smell of wood smoke and boiling broth drifts from a narrow doorway. Inside, the kitchen is little more than a dark room with a hearth dominating one wall. There's no chimney, only a hole in the roof for the smoke to escape, which means most of it lingers in the air, stinging the eyes and coating the walls in a greasy black film. Cooking here is an all-day affair. The fire must be kept alive constantly, fed with logs, sticks, or even dried animal dung when wood is scarce. In towns, kitchens are smaller than most imagine. Space is a luxury, and many poorer families cook in a single pot, whatever they can get thrown in together. This is the medieval pottage, a stew that never fully cools, topped up daily with new ingredients, old scraps, and whatever the market or the garden offers. On good days, that might mean cabbage, onions and beans. On better days, a piece of salted pork or a bone with enough meat to flavour the broth. But there are worse days too, when meat might be whatever was found after the butcher closed, bits swept from the floor, unidentifiable offcuts, or in some whispered cases, meat from animals that hadn't died cleanly. Officially, such things aren't sold. Unofficially, no one can afford to be too choosy. You watch as the cook, a broad-shouldered woman with flour dust in her sleeves, drops a lump of bread into the pot to soak. The bread is dark, dense, and heavy with bran. Fine white bread exists, but only for the wealthy. This coarse loaf is what most people eat daily, and even bread can be deceptive. Some bakers stretch flour with ground beans, chestnuts, or worse, chalk or powdered bone, to make it go further. Such tricks are illegal in some towns, but catching a baker in the act is rare, and proving it rarer still. Fish is another staple, especially on church fasting days when meat is forbidden. Fresh fish is expensive unless you live near the coast. So much of what's sold inland is salted, dried, or smoked. There are tales of salted fish being soaked to remove the brine, then resalted and sold again, each cycle leaching a little more quality until it's little more than leather. Still, for those who can't afford better, it's food. In wealthier kitchens, spices appear, pepper, cinnamon, saffron, often worth more by weight than gold. These aren't just for flavour, they mask the taste of meat past its prime. Historians sometimes romanticise this as exotic luxury. The truth is more practical and far less appetising. Spices kept questionable food from being thrown away. You reach for a cup of ale, the drink of choice, at nearly every meal. Water, even from the town well, can carry disease. Ale is safer. It's weaker than the drinks served in taverns, but strong enough to kill off the worst of the sickness. In the brewing process, children drink it daily, and no one thinks twice. In the corner, a small side table holds something less openly discussed. Herbs and powders meant for private use. Parsley seeds to bring on a mist month. Henbane to dull pain. And other plants that could be medicine or poison depending on the dose. The cook doesn't speak of them, but she notices you notice. In a town where official medicine is expensive and often useless, the kitchen is sometimes the only pharmacy people trust. When the meal is ready, it will be ladled into rough wooden bowls. Everyone eats with spoons or simply their hands, tearing bread to dip into the stew. There's no concept of separate portions. You take what you can while it's hot, because once it's gone, there may not be more until tomorrow. This kitchen, smoky and cramped, is the quiet heart of survival. But the smells and flavours hide truths few write down. Hunger, risk, and the fine line between nourishment and something that could kill you. From the street, the bathhouse looks almost welcoming. A wide, low building with steam curling lazily from its roof vents. The air outside is heavy with the mingled scents of hot water, herbs, and the faint sharpness of wood smoke from the stoves inside. For many townsfolk, this is one of the few places to truly feel warm in winter, and the lure of that heat pulls people from every walk of life. Inside, the noise hits first, laughter, the slap of water, the low hum of conversations too private for the marketplace. The main room is dimly lit by oil lamps, their light glinting off the surface of a large central pool. Along the walls, smaller tubs stand ready, some steaming, others cooling, each with a different purpose. Some for washing, some for soaking sore muscles, and some for things less openly discussed. Bathhouses in the medieval world were more than hygiene. For most people, bathing at home meant a quick splash with cold water from a basin, maybe warmed over the fire if you had fuel to spare. Here, for a small fee, you could immerse yourself in hot water, scrub away weeks of grime, and leave feeling lighter. But what brought people here as much as the cleanliness was the company. Men and women sometimes bathed separately, sometimes together, depending on local custom, and the latter always drew certain rumours. Couples might come here under the pretext of bathing, but slip away to private rooms at the back. Prostitution, officially banned in many towns, often flourished in the bathhouse, under the watchful eye of the keeper, who took a cut of every deal. The attendants move through the steam with practised ease, carrying buckets of hot water from the stove room. They offer not just soap and towels, but also herbs to steep in the baths, rosemary for aching joints, chamomile for relaxation, and more exotic plants for those who can pay. Some herbs are meant to soothe, others are chosen for more secret purposes. Contraceptives disguised as women's remedies, stimulants for men, or even concoctions to dull the senses before a risky conversation. You notice a corner table where 3 men sit wrapped in linen towels, their voices low. One is a merchant you saw earlier in the market, another wears the insignia of the city watch, and the third is unknown to you, his face half hidden by the steam. They lean in close, hands occasionally tapping the table in emphasis. Whatever their business, they chose this place for a reason. In the noise and warmth, words can disappear like vapour, and no one thinks twice about strangers sitting together here. Bathhouses also carried risk. The same heat and moisture that made them comfortable were perfect for spreading disease. Skin infections, parasites, and worse passed from person to person in the water. Physicians sometimes warned against them during outbreaks, but when the choice was between staying cold and filthy or risking illness, most people took their chances. At the far end of the room, an older woman sits on a bench, slowly combing her long grey hair. She's known here, not for washing, but for knowing. If you need to find someone, buy something forbidden, or send a message quietly, she can arrange it. Her services aren't on the price list, but those who use them never forget the cost. As you step back toward the door, the steam clings to your skin and clothes. Outside, the winter air will cut through it in seconds. The bathhouse may leave you cleaner, but it also leaves you carrying whispers and secrets. Things as impossible to wash away as the city's own dirt. When the sun dips below the rooftops, the city changes. The market stalls are shuttered, the respectable shops locked up, and the clean daylight version of the streets fades into shadow. The only light comes from the occasional torch or oil lamp, their glow throwing long, shifting shapes across the walls. In the gaps between them, darkness settles thick and complete. Most decent folk are indoors by now. They know the dangers that come out after dark, both the ones you can see and the ones you can't. The city watch makes its rounds, but their presence is as much about being seen as it is about safety. In truth, many avoid trouble unless it's right in front of them. Others accept a quiet bribe to walk the other way. The streets belong to different rulers at night. Small gangs of young men roam, some drunk, others simply looking for easy prey. Pickpockets ply their trade with even less fear than in daylight. No need for sleight of hand when you can vanish into the shadows seconds after the theft. And then there are the footpads who don't bother with finesse at all. They'll block your path, demand your purse, and leave you bleeding if you refuse. But not all the night's dealings are violent. Some are just hidden from polite society. Doors that looked ordinary in the day now stand ajar, with a faint glow spilling out. Inside, illegal gambling tables are busy, dice clattering and coins piling high. The air is heavy with smoke, ale and tension. Every hand could make or break a man's fortune. In another alley, a side door leads into what passes for a brothel here, though it might simply be a rented back room of a tavern. The city officially condemns such places, but they operate with a steady stream of customers, many of them the same men who make the laws against them. For some women, this work is survival. For others, it's a trap they can never quite escape. You hear the sound of feet behind you, fast, light, practiced. A boy darts past, clutching something under his arm. Moments later, a man stumbles into the alley, shouting curses. The boy is gone before you can turn. In the day, theft is a crime. At night, it's simply part of the rhythm of the streets. The smells are different too. With the day's business done, chamber pots are emptied into the gutters. The mix of waste, rotting food, and wet earth creates a stink so strong it clings to your clothes. Somewhere, a cat yowls, answered by the barking of a dog. These are the city's scavengers, competing for scraps. Not all shadows hide danger. Some hide the desperate, beggars curling into doorways for warmth, mothers rocking infants wrapped in rags, runaways who would rather face the night than return to where they came from. The city watch often drives them away, but like the night itself, they return with the setting sun. As the hours deepen, the streets grow quieter. The last drinkers stagger home. The watch's footsteps echo down the lanes, and the torches burn lower. But in certain corners, the night is just getting started. Deals struck, goods exchanged, grudges settled, all far from the light of day. By morning, most of the evidence will be gone. The streets will fill again, the markets will open, and the city will pretend the night never happened. But the shadows will still be there, waiting for the sun to go down again. The hospital is nothing like the sterile, white-walled buildings of the modern world. It's a long, low hall, its walls of cold stone, and its air thick with the mingled smells of wood smoke, urine, sweat, and a sharper tang you can't quite place. Iron, perhaps, or something rotting. Light filters in through small high windows, falling across rows of pallets where the sick and injured lie beneath rough wool blankets. Here, hospital doesn't always mean a place for healing. In many towns, it's as much a shelter for the poor and dying as it is a place for treatment. The patients are a mixture. A labourer who collapsed in the fields, a child coughing so hard his whole body shakes, a soldier with a festering wound from a fight weeks ago. Many will never leave. The care is simple and often brutal. Water is drawn from the well, sometimes boiled but not always, and poured over wounds. Cloth strips, washed if the staff has time, are bound around injuries. Herbs are ground into poultices or brewed into bitter teas. Willow bark for pain, horehound for cough, garlic for infection. But doses are guessed, not measured, and the same plant that might heal could just as easily kill. Bloodletting is a common remedy for almost everything, from fevers to headaches. A patient sits pale and shaking while a barber surgeon opens a vein with a short blade, letting the blood run into a shallow bowl. The theory is that it restores balance to the body's humours. In reality, it often leaves the weak even weaker. But the practice continues because it's what's always been done. The staff are a mix of trained monks, untrained helpers, and women from the town who come to clean or feed patients in exchange for small payment or the church's favour. Their tasks are relentless, emptying chamber pots, stoking the fire, fetching water, lifting the dead from their pallets and carrying them to the adjoining chapel. Death is so common here that there's no drama to it, only the quiet shifting of bodies to make room for the next. Privacy is non-existent. Patients lie side by side, the contagious next to the wounded, the dying next to those with a chance of recovery. Plague victims, when they appear, change everything. Rooms sealed off, attendants refusing to enter without payment in advance. Even then, many flee. Some treatments are more dangerous than the illness. Burns are cauterized with red-hot iron. Teeth are pulled with iron pincers, no matter the pain. Fractures are bound with rough wooden splints that can cause more damage if not set perfectly. Infections after such procedures are common, and once they set in, there's little to be done. But wait. In a far corner, a man mutters feverishly, clutching at the air. Beside him, a nun murmurs prayers, sprinkling holy water on his brow. For many here, healing is as much about the soul as the body. Sometimes the focus shifts entirely. If a patient's death seems certain, efforts go toward ensuring a good death, with confession and last rites rather than prolonging life. The hospital is a place of compassion, yes, but also of resignation. It is a mirror of the medieval world's reality. Survival is never guaranteed, and sometimes the only thing between life and death is a rough bed, a cup of bitter tea, and the hope that tomorrow the fever breaks. The prison is not a separate, towering fortress like in later centuries. It's tucked into the lower floors of a civic building, beneath the courtrooms and storage rooms, a damp, windowless place that smells of mould, sweat, and human waste. The air is heavy, unmoving, and the only light comes from the thin slits high in the walls or the flicker of a torch in a corridor. Cells are small and bare, little more than stone boxes with straw thrown on the floor for bedding. In some, the straw is so rotten and foul-smelling that even rats avoid it. In others, the rats are the only other living things besides the prisoners. Chains fixed to the walls clink softly as men shift in the dark, their movements slow and tired. Imprisonment in the medieval world isn't the long-term punishment it is today. More often, it's a holding place, somewhere to keep the accused until trial, the condemned until execution, or the indebted until their families can pay. But waiting can last weeks or months, and many never live to see the outside again. Illness spreads fast in the close quarters, and the weakest are the first to go. Food is sparse, often no more than a hunk of bread and a jug of water once a day, if that. Wealthier prisoners might arrange for better meals, paying the jailer or having family bring cooked food. The poor survive on scraps, sometimes trading what little they have for an extra bite. Drinking water can be worse than the food. It's drawn from the same sources as the rest of the town, but here it sits in barrels until it tastes stale and sour. The jailers wield enormous power. Some are brutal, using beatings and deprivation to control the inmates. Others are corrupt, selling small comforts, a blanket, a candle, a few minutes in the yard, for coin. Bribes can also buy protection from other prisoners, because in the darkness of these cells, violence is common. Debtors make up a large part of the prison population. Their crimes are not theft or violence, but owing more than they can pay. Some bring their families with them, wives and children living in the same filth, sleeping on the same straw. For these, release depends entirely on raising the money, something impossible when you can't work. Punishments inside the prison can be as severe as those waiting outside. Shackling a man in the standing cell forces him upright for days until his legs swell and his back locks. The hunger pit is worse. No light, no food, only water, until the prisoner either confesses or dies. You pass a cell where two men sit hunched against the wall. One has the look of a petty thief, his clothes worn but not ragged. The other wears finer fabric, though it's stained now. His crime? Offending the wrong man in power. Here, guilt or innocence matters less than influence. The poor thief might be free in a week. The wealthy man might never leave. And above it all, the sound of the city goes on. A muffled reminder that life continues just beyond the walls, indifferent to who rots in the dark. The prison doesn't just confine bodies, it swallows time, memory, and the hope of return. The graveyard lies just beyond the church walls, where the grass grows uneven and the earth is soft from centuries of digging and refilling. The air here smells faintly of damp soil and old wood, with a sharper tang when the wind shifts from the direction of the charnel house. A small windowless building where bones are stored, once graves are needed for the newly dead. In a medieval town, death is not rare. It comes with the changing of the seasons, with outbreaks of disease, with accidents and war. The graveyard is not just a resting place, it is an ever-turning wheel. Graves are shallow by modern standards, 3 to 4 feet deep, enough to cover the body, but easy to reopen when space runs out. Old remains are exhumed after some years, the bones stacked neatly inside the charnel house, freeing the ground for someone else. The markers vary wildly. Wealthy families raise carved stone crosses or slabs, their inscriptions clear and enduring. The poor make do with wooden stakes or nothing at all. Within a generation, their resting place is forgotten, their bones mingled with others in the communal piles. This is not neglect, it is the reality of limited land and the constant pressure of mortality. Burials are often hasty, especially during epidemics. A priest might offer prayers over a row of open graves before the bodies are lowered in, one after another, wrapped in simple shrouds. Coffins are rare, used mostly for the rich or for transporting a body from afar. Most are laid directly in the earth. In the worst times, a grave might hold more than one. Strangers in life, forced together in death. There are whispers, half believed, half feared, about bodies buried in unconsecrated ground. Criminals, heretics, and suicides are denied a place here. Their remains dumped outside the walls or at crossroads where their souls are said to wander. Sometimes these graves are disturbed by dogs or scavengers, and the townsfolk pass by without looking too closely. In the graveyard, you see more than the fresh mounds. There are the sunken hollows where the earth has settled over older burials, the leaning stones with names worn away, and the scattered bones that surface after heavy rain. Children play here in daylight, weaving between the stones, unbothered by what lies beneath. For them, it is simply another part of the town. At the far edge, near the low stone wall, stands a small shack where the gravedigger keeps his tools. He is an odd figure in town life, necessary but rarely welcomed. His hands are always dirty, his clothes carrying the smell of freshly turned soil. Some say he knows too much. Who was buried where? Which graves were opened in the night? Which bodies were buried with valuables? There are rumours of rings and coins slipping quietly into his pockets before the earth covers the dead. At dusk the graveyard changes. The wind picks up. The shadows lengthen. And even those who are cheerful here in daylight begin to walk faster. The dead may rest, but the living bring their own fears to this place. In the medieval world, the graveyard is not just about remembering, it is about making space for the next arrival. The fair comes only a few times a year, but when it does, it transforms the town. The streets swell with strangers, traders, performers, pickpockets and fortune seekers, until it feels as though the walls can barely contain them. Brightly dyed tents line the open space outside the main square, the air thick with the smells of roasting meat, spiced wine, and the less pleasant reek of too many bodies packed close together. Officially, the fair is about commerce. Merchants from far-off towns set up stalls to sell fine cloth, rare spices, and tools of better quality than most locals can make. Farmers bring cartloads of grain, cheese, and livestock, hoping to leave with their pockets full of coin. But beyond the rows of respectable trade, the real business happens in the unmarked alleys between stalls. Here you can buy goods that never appear on the official tally sheets: unlicensed weapons, stolen jewellery, books banned by the church, even relics of dubious authenticity, a splinter from the true cross, a vial of saint's blood that looks suspiciously like sheep's. The sellers keep their voices low, but the crowds make perfect cover. Entertainment is everywhere, and much of it would scandalise the church if it weren't so profitable. Jugglers toss knives dangerously close to the heads of laughing children. Acrobats balance on ropes strung between poles, their bright costumes flashing in the sun. There are animal shows too. Bears on chains, trained dogs, and in one tent, a caged creature, the barker swears, is half man, half beast. Whether it's true hardly matters. The crowd pays to see it. Ale flows freely from dawn to dusk, and by mid-afternoon, many fairgoers are well past sober. Brawls break out without warning, sometimes over dice games, sometimes over insults, sometimes over nothing at all. The town watch makes an appearance, but here their role is less about stopping trouble than keeping it from spilling into the main streets. Gambling thrives in every corner. Cards, dice, shell games. The stakes can be coin, goods, or even promises. Debts that will be called in long after the fair has packed up and gone. More than one man has woken the morning after, with empty pockets, and no memory of how they were emptied. The fair is also a hunting ground for thieves. Purses vanish, rings slip from fingers, and entire sacks of grain disappear from carts left unwatched for even a moment. Travelling pickpockets work in teams, one distracting while another takes and then melting back into the crowd. Locals who lose too much sometimes take matters into their own hands. More than one suspicious outsider has been found beaten in a ditch after nightfall. As evening falls, the fair grows wilder. Torches replace sunlight, casting flickering light over the stalls and tents. Music spills from a corner where musicians play pipes and drums, and dancers, some masked, some barefaced, move in ways that would draw fines if done in the church square. Deals are struck in shadow, hands clasping an agreement over goods or services no law would allow. By dawn, the fairground will be littered with broken mugs, trampled food, and the odd body, drunk, dead, or simply sleeping it off. The merchants will pack their carts, the performers will move on, and the town will return to its quieter rhythms. But for a few days each year, the fair turns it into something else entirely. A place where rules bend, fortunes change, and everyone leaves with more stories than they arrived with, though not all of them can be told aloud. The weaponsmith's workshop is hotter than any kitchen or bathhouse in the city. The air trembles with heat from the forge, a square mouth glowing white-orange in the gloom. Sparks leap and die in the sooty air as the smith hammers a red-hot blade on the anvil, each strike ringing through the street outside. Here, steel is shaped into power. Swords, daggers, spearheads, and arrowheads line the walls or lie cooling in troughs of water. Officially, every weapon made here is destined for the city guard, local militias, or noble households. But anyone who's been in town long enough knows that steel has a way of finding its own path, and not always to the side of the law. The smith, a broad man with arms like iron bars, works with his two apprentices. They pump the bellows, stoke the coal, and bring him tools without a word. Each piece is hammered, quenched, and polished until it gleams. The wealthier customers commission blades with fine engravings, or hilts wrapped in tooled leather, both status symbols and weapons. But not every customer walks through the front door in daylight. At night, when the shutters are closed and the forge is banked low, the side door opens to men in hoods, who pay in coin without asking for a receipt. These are weapons for disputes that won't see a courtroom. Short blades easy to hide, or crossbow bolts tipped with barbs meant to leave wounds no physician can clean. Metal is expensive, and so is skill. To make ends meet, some smiths take on quiet side jobs, reshaping stolen blades to disguise them, filing off heraldic marks from armour, or forging exact copies of a guard sword for someone who wants to pass unnoticed. The penalty for being caught is severe, but the profits are high, and the customer's often dangerous enough that refusal isn't an option. The forge is also a hub for information. Men waiting for their orders exchange news. Rumours of war, a feud brewing between guilds, a wealthy merchant hiring extra guards for a mysterious shipment. The smith hears it all and remembers most. His role in the town's politics is silent but deep, and more than once a well-placed warning from him has saved a life or ended one. In the back of the shop, beneath a heavy canvas, lies something not for public sale, a set of weapons destined for an outlaw's camp in the hills. The smith doesn't admit it, but the apprentices know. The delivery will be made by someone else, and the payment, twice what the city guard pays, will arrive in a sealed pouch. As you leave, the ring of hammer on steel follows you down the street. The forge never really sleeps. It just cools until the next order needs filling. In a city where survival can depend on the length of a blade, the weaponsmith's work is as much a currency as coin, and just as easily spent in darkness as in light. The gallows stand just outside the city walls, where the main road passes close enough for every traveller to see. It's deliberate, an unmissable message, to anyone entering or leaving. Here, the law is not a rumour. The wooden frame creaks faintly in the wind, the nooses swaying like grotesque decorations against the sky. On execution days, the place transforms. By mid-morning, a crowd gathers, merchants taking a break from their stalls, peasants from nearby villages, even children perched on shoulders for a better view. There's no shame in watching. In fact, the authorities encourage it. The spectacle is part punishment, part warning, and part entertainment. Vendors set up near the edge of the crowd, selling pies, mugs of ale, and roasted chestnuts. It feels disturbingly like a fair, except the main act is death. People gossip about the condemned, what crime they committed, whether the sentence is just, and how well they might hold their nerve when the rope tightens. The truth is often less certain than the rumours. Some hang for murder, others for theft, and a few for nothing more than being on the wrong side of a political quarrel. When the condemned arrive, escorted by the city guard, the mood shifts. Some in the crowd jeer, others pray under their breath. The prisoners might be pale and shaking or defiant, shouting final words meant to outlive them. The guards lead them up the steps to the platform, the wood darkened with years of use. Hangings are not always quick. A skilled executioner can break the neck instantly, with a well-measured drop, but not all executions are done with skill or mercy. Sometimes the rope is too short, and the condemned kicks for long minutes before the body goes still. The crowd watches it all. Some turn away, others lean forward for a better look. There are more brutal ends too, burning for heresy, beheading for treason. But the gallows are the most common, cheap, simple, and visible to all. After the body is cut down, it might be returned to the family, but in many cases it is displayed longer. Hung from the town gates, nailed to a crossroads gibbet, or left to rot in an iron cage as a permanent warning. Children run close to the platform once the execution ends, daring each other to touch the rope. Some pluck splinters from the wood, claiming they bring luck or protection from the same fate. The guards don't stop them. The lesson sinks deeper when it's carried home in a child's pocket. By evening the crowd disperses, leaving only the empty frame and the wind humming through the ropes. Tomorrow life will go on as if nothing happened, until the next name is called, and the next crowd gathers to watch. In the medieval city, justice is not just served, it is displayed, so that no one can pretend they didn't see. The docks are alive from dawn until well past nightfall, a tangle of wooden piers, creaking ships, and the shouts of men hauling cargo. The air is thick with the smell of salt, fish and pitch from the corking pots, overlaid with the sour reek of stagnant water in the shallows. Seagulls wheel overhead, their cries mingling with the clang of rigging and the splash of oars. Officially, this is the gateway of the city's wealth. Ships from distant ports bring barrels of wine, sacks of grain, bolts of fine cloth, and crates of spices. Merchants in fur-lined cloaks pace the piers, ticking items off ledgers as crews unload. The harbour master oversees it all, quill in hand, making sure the proper taxes and duties are recorded, or at least that the records match the fees paid. But just beyond the reach of the harbour master's gaze, another economy hums. After dark, or even in the shadow of the busiest daylight hours, certain crates never reach the customs table. Small skiffs pull alongside anchored ships, taking on goods that will be rowed ashore, somewhere far from official eyes. In these hidden exchanges, the most profitable cargoes are often the ones that never appear on paper. Smuggled silks, stolen jewellery, rare books banned by the church, even people, runaways seeking passage, or captives to be sold in another port. Dockside taverns serve as the beating heart of this world. Inside, sailors drink hard, spend fast and talk too much. Deals are struck over mugs of ale sealed with a handshake or a knife laid on the table. A man who can speak 2 languages and hold his drink can earn a fortune here as a go-between, matching smugglers with buyers or arranging quiet passages for those who can't afford questions. The dangers are constant. Drunken fights break out with little warning, and the black water between the piers swallows more than one unlucky soul each year. The watch patrols the area, but they know better than to interfere too deeply in dock business unless ordered from above. Many carry dock money in their pockets, a silent payment for keeping their eyes turned the other way. You pass a warehouse with its doors barred, a guard leaning on a pike outside. Inside, the crates are stacked high, some marked with legitimate merchant seals, others with symbols known only to those in the trade. At night, a different crew will arrive to move those unmarked crates to carts bound for the countryside, where they'll vanish into hidden cellars or forest hideouts. And then there are the ships themselves. Some fly false flags to avoid inspection, swapping colours once they're far from shore. Others carry dual manifests, one for the harbour master, one for the real cargo. The crew knows which is which, and those who talk too freely tend to disappear between ports. By day, the docks look like industry and progress. By night, they are a maze of shadows, whispers, and quiet exchanges. To most of the city, they are simply where ships come and go. But for those who know how to navigate them, the docks are a place where fortunes are made, and sometimes where people vanish without leaving a ripple in the water. The tavern door creaks open, and a rush of heat, smoke, and noise spills into the cold street. Inside, the air is thick. Stale ale, sweat, roasting meat, and the faint, sweet tang of spilled wine soaking into the floorboards. The light is dim, coming from tallow candles stuck into iron holders along the walls, their flames bending with every draught from the door. This isn't the kind of place where you come just to drink. Here, cups and coins change hands as quickly as news and rumours. Farmers and labourers sit shoulder to shoulder with travelling merchants, mercenaries, and the occasional cloaked stranger whose face stays in shadow. At the long wooden table nearest the fire, a dice game is in full swing. The players laugh loudly, but the tension in their eyes betrays how much they've wagered. One man's hand rests too close to the dagger at his belt, ready in case the dice fall wrong. Across the room, a pair of musicians play a tune on pipe and drum, their rhythm competing with the roar of voices. The tavern keeper moves constantly, refilling jugs, shouting at the kitchen for more food, and slipping into the back room when a customer taps twice on the counter. A signal for something stronger than ale, or perhaps something not meant to be drunk at all. Those backroom deals are rarely just about drink. Smuggled goods, stolen jewellery, or information about where the watch will be patrolling tomorrow night. Everything has a price here. Not all business is whispered. In one corner, a man in fine but travel-stained clothes loudly offers to hire strong arms for work outside the city. No details are given, but the pay he promises is enough to tempt more than one listener. Whether it's guarding a caravan or raiding one, no one asks too many questions. A serving girl moves between the tables, her tray laden with steaming bowls of stew and mugs of ale. She knows most of the customers by sight and some by name, and she hears more than anyone else in the room. A quick glance from her can signal that it's safe to speak, or that it's time to change the subject. As the night deepens, the mood shifts. Laughter grows louder, the dice games riskier, the arguments sharper. A shove at one table turns into a fistfight, drawing cheers and jeers, until the tavern keeper's son wades in with a club to break it apart. The loser is thrown out into the street, still swearing. By the time the candles burn low, the room is a haze of smoke and murmurs. Deals have been made, alliances forged, grudges started. Some leave with lighter pockets and heavier heads. Others leave with something far more dangerous, a promise, a plan, or a name whispered in their ear. When the last door closes, the tavern's secrets stay within its walls, waiting for the next night to be poured out again with the ale. In the medieval city, the tavern is more than a place to drink. It's where the undercurrent of the town runs strongest, and where the most dangerous stories begin. The Mint is not grand, it's a squat, stone building near the heart of the city, guarded day and night by men in livery with spears in hand. Inside, the air smells of heated metal, oil, and the faint tang of sweat from the men who work the presses. The sound is constant, hammer on die, die on blank, each blow striking the face of the realm into a disc of silver or gold. Here, money is not just counted, it is made. Sheets of precious metal are cut into small rough blanks, each weighed carefully to ensure it matches the standard. Then they are placed between engraved dies and struck with a hammer, imprinting the ruler's image on one side and a seal on the other. The work is rhythmic, almost hypnotic, and brutally hard on the hands and arms. Every coin is meant to be exact in weight and purity, but not every coin is. Sometimes the flaws are honest, imperfect blanks, a slip of the hammer, but sometimes they are not. A trusted worker might shave a sliver from each blank before striking, pocketing the shavings to melt down later. Others add less silver to the alloy than required, stretching the metal supply further than the records say. Such tampering is treason if discovered, but the temptation is high, and the line between official policy and quiet corruption can be thin. The Mint also has a shadow trade. On certain nights, coins are struck without the ruler's seal, intended not for the marketplace, but for bribes, payments to spies, hush money for witnesses, or the wages of men whose work cannot be publicly acknowledged. These coins often end up circulating anyway, mixed with the rest, but no one dares point it out. The guards keep a close watch, but they are not incorruptible. A bribe might allow a sack of blanks to leave the Mint under a cloak, to be struck in a hidden workshop elsewhere. Counterfeiters mimic the official dies as closely as they can, but even a perfect forgery carries risk. Being caught with one can mean the gallows or worse. Still, the forgeries flow, especially in border towns where few can compare them side by side with official currency. The Mintmaster's office overlooks the main floor, a raised platform from which he can watch the workers. His records are meticulous, but he is also a man who understands that a certain amount of loss is inevitable and profitable if directed to the right hands. A loyal Mintmaster can keep a city's political machinery well oiled with coin no one asks about. For most people, coins are coins, heavy in the pocket, welcome in the hand. But here, each one carries a story of whose silver it was, who struck it, and what shadow it might pass through before it ends up buying bread in the market. In the medieval world, money is power in its purest form, and in the Mint that power is made with every strike of the hammer. The bells toll from the church tower, slow and heavy, announcing the final hour before curfew. The streets, once noisy with trade, argument and song, are now quieter. The last of the day's smoke curling from chimneys into the cold air. The scent of cooking fires fades, replaced by the damp, earthy smell of night settling in. Shutters close one by one. Doors are barred. A few figures hurry along the lanes, late drinkers, merchants locking their stalls, a watchman making his round with a lantern swinging from his hand. The light it casts is small, swallowed quickly by the shadows that pool in every alley. Inside the houses, families huddle close to the hearth. Meals are finished, bowls washed or simply licked clean, and the day's work is spoken of in quiet voices. Beyond the warmth of the fire, the rooms are dark, the air heavy with the smell of smoke, sweat, and the damp wool of cloaks hung to dry. The only light comes from tallow candles, their flames bending with every draught that slips through the wooden shutters. But not everyone sleeps. In the back rooms of taverns, men lean over tables, their heads close together, planning trades and bargains the city's laws would never allow. In the upper chamber of a merchant's house, a locked chest is opened, its contents weighed and sorted, some to be declared at the next market, some to vanish quietly into another man's hands. And in the narrow streets near the docks, a skiff slides silently to shore, its oars barely rippling the black water. The city breathes differently at night. The honest work is done, but another kind of work begins, the kind that relies on silence, shadows, and the certainty that daylight is still hours away. Somewhere, a gambler counts his winnings by candlelight. Somewhere else, a debtor prays that the knock at his door will not come before morning. From the high wall above the gate, a guard looks out over the dark countryside. The road is empty now, but he knows it won't stay that way. Travellers will arrive before dawn, bringing new goods, new rumours, and perhaps new trouble. Inside the walls, the city sleeps fitfully, its heart beats steady but restless. You've seen it all in a single day. The clamour of the market, the stink of the tannery, the quiet deals in the churchyard, the hidden dangers of the streets after dark. You've walked through places where survival means compromise, where laws are bent in whispers, and where every coin, loaf of bread or sharpened blade might carry a story no one dares speak aloud. The medieval city is not all filth and cruelty, but it is never free from them either. By morning, the cycle will begin again, and when the first light touches the stone walls, the same trades, the same bargains, the same risks will unfold, as they have for generations. Above, the church bell tolls once more, echoing over rooftops and through empty streets. The city settles into its night, carrying its secrets into the dark. Tomorrow it will open them again. One clang of the bell, one market stall, one shadow at a time.